It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The Labour Party suspends MP and former Minister Dan Norris following his arrest on suspicion of rape and child sex offences. The Israeli military admits it mistakenly targeted an aid convoy in Gaza that left 15 people dead after a new video of the attack emerges. The fallout from Trump's tariffs being felt in the UK as Jaguar Land Rover halts shipments to the United States. The Prime Minister and the French President say a trade war is in nobody's interest as Sir Keir Starmer hits the phones to coordinate a response to the tariff crisis. Hands off the protests against Donald Trump across America and around the world. Plus, we take a look in the rehearsal room as iconic album Quadrophenia is reimagined as a ballet. Keeping it in the family, Willie Mullins trained Nick Rockett wins the Grand National, ridden by his son, Patrick. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. The Labour Party has suspended MP Dan Norris after he was arrested on suspicion of rape, child sexual offences, child abduction and misconduct in a public office. Our correspondent Alice Porter joins me now and has been following this story. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, Dan Norris has been a major figure for Labour in the southwest of England. He's been the regional mayor for the west of England since 2021. So this news that he's been arrested on suspicion of child sex offences will be shocking to many, not only within the Labour Party, but in many other parts of the country as well. Labour have confirmed that Dan Norris has been suspended. We have a statement from their spokesperson who said that Dan Norris MP was immediately suspended by the Labour Party upon being informed of his arrest. We cannot comment further while the police investigation is ongoing. Now, we have approached Avon and Somerset Police, who've confirmed that a man in his 60s has been arrested on suspicion of a number of serious offences. Now, a statement from the force has said, in December 2024, we received a referral from another police force relating to alleged non-recent child sex offences having been committed against a girl. Most of the offences are alleged to have occurred in the 2000s, but we're also investigating an alleged offence of rape from the 2020s. An investigation led by officers within Operation Bluestone, our dedicated rape and serious sexual assault investigation team remains ongoing and is at an early stage. The victim is being supported and given access to any specialist help or support she needs. A man aged in his 60s was arrested on Friday on suspicion of sexual offences against a girl, rape, child abduction and misconduct in a public office. He's been released on conditional bail for inquiries to continue. So that's a statement there from Avon and Somerset Police. We have approached Dan Norris for a comment. We have not had a response yet. It is also worth saying that Dan Norris, was a vocal campaigner against fox hunting, and we've heard that the League Against Cruel Sports, they have confirmed that Dan Norris has stepped down as chair of their organisation.
OK, Alice, thank you. New footage has emerged of the moment 15 aid workers were killed in Gaza last month, contradicting the Israeli military's version of the attack. The video obtained by the Palestine Red Crescent Society has been verified by Sky News. It shows a convoy of ambulances and the fire truck the rescue workers were travelling in on the 23rd of March, moving in darkness with their headlights on and emergency lights flashing when Israeli troops attacked. The Israel Defense Forces have admitted they mistakenly identified the convoy as a threat, having initially said the vehicles were advancing suspiciously without lights or emergency signals. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, has this report and a warning it does include the moment of the attack.
It is shortly before dawn on the 23rd of March. The first rays of sunlight can be seen as a convoy of Palestinian Red Crescent ambulances are travelling on a road to the north of Rafah, searching for missing colleagues. The Israeli military would later claim that they didn't have their emergency lights on. This video shows very clearly that, in fact, they did. The convoy spots the missing ambulance on the side of the road, so they pull over. The paramedics, wearing their uniforms, get out and start to move towards the vehicle. Israeli soldiers then open fire. The video goes black, but the mobile phone keeps recording for another 5 minutes, much of which is almost constant gunfire. One of the paramedics, Rifat Redwan, can be desperately heard reciting the Shahada, the Muslim prayer before death. Forgive me, mother, he says. This is the path I chose to help people. He was later found with a bullet in his head and this mobile phone still on him. It was 5 days before the IDF gave permission to the United Nations to retrieve the 15 bodies. They were found in a mass grave and their vehicles crushed beside them. The Israeli military has claimed that 8 of the dead were Hamas. They have not yet provided any evidence of that. The Israeli military has also claimed that the vehicles were travelling without coordination in a combat zone. But a Sky News investigation has revealed that an evacuation order was not issued by the IDF for that area until at least an hour after the incident.
Their ambulances were clearly marked and they should have returned to the families. They did not. Even in the most complex conflict zones, there are rules. These rules of international humanitarian law could not be clearer. Civilians must be protected. Humanitarians must be protected. Health services must be protected.
Following the emergence of the video, the IDF has released a new statement saying that all claims, including documentation circulating about the incident, will be thoroughly and deeply examined to understand the sequence of events and the handling of the situation. More than 400 aid workers have been killed during the 18 months war in Gaza, as well as tens of thousands of civilians. Israel's version of events, often claiming that the targets were Hamas, have rarely been proven or disproven because of the lack of public evidence. On this occasion, this video undermines and contradicts the IDF's justification for attacking the Palestinian ambulances. And it will, inevitably, confirm in some people's minds the accusation that war crimes are being committed in Gaza and covered up. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will travel to Washington tomorrow to meet Donald Trump in what will be their second White House sit-down since the US president returned to office. The two are expected to discuss the recent escalation in fighting in Gaza, which has seen Israel set up a new security corridor in the enclave, as well as trade tariffs. As part of Trump's sweeping new policy, some Israeli goods exported to the United States now face a 17% tariff, despite Israel cancelling its remaining levies on US imports earlier this week. The real-world effects of Donald Trump's tariffs are beginning to be felt over here after Jaguar Land Rover announced it's pausing shipments to the United States. A 25% levy on all foreign cars imported into America came into force on Thursday. A wider minimum baseline tariff of 10% on all goods imported from around the world, including the UK, was introduced by the White House from this morning. Jaguar Land Rover's workers are now worried about what the decision means for their jobs. Our social affairs correspondent Becky Johnson reports from Solihull.
As British car manufacturers face the impact of US tariffs, Jaguar Land Rover has announced it's pausing shipments to America. It's a move that sparked concern among its workers. This plant in Solihull employs around 10,000 people. Richard worked for the company for over 30 years.
An awful lot of their trade is with America. There are going to be a lot of jobs lost if they don't get it sorted.
What do you think the British government should do?
I think they're playing it right. They should kind of play it cool, if you like, and just see what if they can get a trade deal. because I think a tit for tat is just going to do nobody any good at all.
In a town with car making in its DNA, people fear the worst, as the Institute for Public Policy Research warns 25,000 jobs could be at risk across the sector.
If something went that's such large in the community, would be devastating to people. It really would. If you wipe that off the landscape, what a chunk of people that will not only work there, but the families that have now not got income.
And what do you think would be the impact on the town and surrounding areas?
Well, we could see more shops close. People won't have so much money in their pockets.
In places like here in Solihull, businesses rely on the custom of people who work at the car plant and in the automotive supply chain. If those jobs are at risk or even perceived to be at risk, that's a worry for everyone.
Look out, here we go.
American vehicles circle the town square. The man running them can see his takings grinding to a halt.
People they're going to cut back, aren't they? They're not going to. They're going to watch the pennies, which we all do anyway. So they will. Yes, it will have a knock-on effect.
What do you think the UK government should be doing now?
I would monitor it to start with to see how things start to go and what effect it's going to have on the economy. Then, if it's going to be devastating effects, then they need to put something in place.
For any business that exports to America, there's now uncertainty.
When I first saw that it was going to be 10% tariffs, I felt a little bit like, well, that could be worse. It's wrong that we're not standing up to him and that we're not calling him out, but also I don't want the economic situation to get any worse, and I understand that's the situation that everyone is trying to balance.
But with the higher 25% tariff, it's the car industry being hit hardest. Jaguar Land Rover described its decision to pause shipments to the States as a short-term decision. But it's the longer-term impact of these tariffs that people here fear. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Solihull.
Well, as businesses like Jaguar Land Rover adapt to the new reality, the Prime Minister today made efforts to coordinate a response to Donald Trump's trade war, holding telephone conversations with world leaders, including the French President Emmanuel Macron. Meanwhile, employers are also preparing for the impact of the Chancellor's increase in national insurance contributions, which come into effect tomorrow. Our political correspondent Nick Martin reports.
Amid the tranquility of Chequers, the Prime Minister is weathering a storm. Speaking to world leaders on the phone this weekend, talking tariffs, what they mean, how to deal with them.
It's a great honour to have Prime Minister Starmer in the Oval Office.
Sir Keir Starmer travelled to Washington on a charm offensive just over 5 weeks ago. But this is a special relationship that is already being tested.
In such an unpredictable time, with such an unpredictable president, whether actually Sir Keir Starmer's approach, which seems to be cautious, is actually the right one.
You don't know what he's going to do next. So therefore, those relationships with our closest European neighbours and others are even more important to keep our economy on track.
But at the same time, you believe that the Prime Minister is not being tough enough and not being stern enough.
You can't have a special relationship with a bully. You have to stand up to the bully.
The Prime Minister has agreed with the French President Emmanuel Macron that a trade war is in no one's interests, but that nothing should be off the table. They also discussed progress being made with the Coalition of the Willing, an international partnership supporting Ukraine against Russia. The workload of world troubles is growing. In London, people gathered to protest against Donald Trump's controversial policies.
I don't think any country should be bullied into submission, so I hope the UK sends a firm message back.
Even if that means fueling a trade war?
I think a trade war is inevitable. Trump is going to have one. He wants one.
It's a tricky position to be in, isn't it? It's hard to know how to negotiate with bonkersness.
The Trump tariffs are sending shockwaves around the globe, and those shockwaves will be felt by people in their everyday lives. And as politicians try to figure out how to respond, British companies and those elsewhere are already making changes. The metal industry has already been feeling the effects of the Trump tariffs, with steel now unable to be sold to the US at an affordable price. Other major industries are also preparing for big changes.
£60 billion worth of exports go and around a quarter to a fifth of that any one time to the United States. So we're trade intensive. So these tariffs are most unwelcome. We're talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of pounds worth of damage.
With businesses, pensioners and farmers unhappy at the government's economic choices, the Prime Minister is rapidly finding out that his options are being limited, not by his own policies, but the inhabitant of the White House, more than 3,000 miles away.
Nick joins me now live from Downing Street. And Nick, the Prime Minister has written in tomorrow's Sunday Telegraph about this. What's he been saying?
Well, in many ways, Gillian, it's quite a wide-ranging opinion editorial, but in some ways it's peppered with subliminal messages where the Prime Minister talks about the world as we knew it has gone. We must rise to the challenge. And he also says that nobody wins through a tariff war. But this bit in particular stands out, where he says the new world is less governed by established rules and more by deals and alliances. It demands the best of British virtues, cool heads, pragmatism and a clear understanding of our national interest. It's worth just picking over some of those words. Deals and alliances, that's very much Donald Trump language. Cool heads and pragmatism, that's very much how Keir Starmer sees himself. And he talks a lot about the national interest. That's how he all wants us to see where his heart lies. But he also talks about the tariff wars and mentions the car industry and the whiskey trade, two industries that are set to lose quite a lot from these tariffs. But he also knows that he has a very difficult week ahead. Remember, tomorrow, as you said earlier, those national insurance contributions for employers go up. That means costs for businesses go up. And he peppered within that newspaper article about potential announcements next week to try and alleviate some of those pressures, to try and get the economy going. Because remember, at the heart of what this government wants to achieve in the next few years is economic growth. It's what the Prime Minister says from this building. It's what the Chancellor says from next door. But just listen to what Hospitality UK are saying tonight. They say the national insurance contributions for employers will reduce trading hours, will reduce staffing hours, will increase prices. It's hardly fertile territory for economic growth. So amid all of these big global challenges, the Prime Minister is going into a very difficult week where he knows businesses are at loggerheads with government policy, and that could seriously impact economic growth.
Indeed, Nick, thank you. And there'll be plenty more reaction to both the national insurance rise and the fallout from Donald Trump's tariffs on Sunday morning with Trevor Phillips, who'll be joined by the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, and Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. Now, it's not just in London where people have been protesting against Donald Trump and the potential start of a global trade war. So-called hands-off demonstrations also took place in other European capitals, including Paris and Berlin, as well as in more than 1,000 cities across the United States. Our US correspondent David Blevin spoke to protesters in Washington.
In the shadow of the Washington Monument, a symbol of America's democracy, they gathered in protest against the president.
Stand tall in every state. Stand tall in truth. Stand tall.
His trade war was the final straw for these people. They say he's targeting working Americans, migrants, and community groups.
I find what is happening in our government so appalling and so immoral. I mean, that's really why I feel like I need to be here.
I finally reached a breaking point. I couldn't take it anymore. Actually, I probably win the long distance award. I came here from Hawaii.
Look at our country. It's embarrassing, like genuinely embarrassing to be like an American right now.
There were protests in 1,000 cities across all 50 states.
We shall overcome.
A nationwide act of defiance that can't have gone unnoticed. But Donald Trump appeared focused on other things, reading headlines about China's tariffs on his way to the golf course. These people are pushing back against what they describe as the most brazen power grab in history. But President Trump's press secretary says anyone who thinks he's going to be deterred by protests like these is living under a rock. Opposition is growing, though, many still refusing to be silenced.
We have to speak out, we have to act, we have to do something, because this is not America.
What do you say to people who would argue that the people have already spoken in that President Trump won the election?
Some people have spoken, and then some people have not. And those of us that have not, we need to speak now.
But will the president listen? He's pressing on with his agenda, regardless of the number, joining the march against him. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Well, as we've been hearing, the Prime Minister and the French President spoke today to talk tariffs, but the two leaders also discussed Ukraine. The call came as defence leaders from countries involved in the coalition of the willing gathered in Kyiv. Meanwhile, authorities in Ukraine say 18 people, including 9 children, were killed in a Russian strike on President Zelensky's hometown. Moscow claimed it was targeting servicemen in the central city of Kryvyi Rih. But Mr. Zelensky said civilians were hit, and the attack shows an unwillingness from Russia to end the war.
My condolences to the family and friends. The missile hit the area next to the residential buildings, a playground, ordinary streets. These are just non-humans. Anyone who could do this, there is no word for these Russian scum.
Time now to get all the very latest sports news with Dave.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Having Harper made football more enjoyable. You don't get stuck on a bad game or a bad training, you just get to go home and see a smiley little face. Football just became so much better for me, and getting to travel the world with her has just been the best thing in the world.
Katrina, can you talk me through the day that you walked into that IVF clinic a few years ago? What was going on in your head?
There wasn't much going on in my head. I tried to not really think about what was about to happen. My period's always spot on the day, and on that day that I walked in, I got my period, and I think it was about a week early. Literally, when I spoke to the doctor, he said, "We can start today." I think which was probably meant to happen, because I wasn't able to really think about the process, what I needed to do, all the medication I needed to go on. To be honest, I hadn't researched it that much. I just went into the clinic to kind of get a bit more information and see if it was even possible.
Did you feel quite fearless, do you think, in that moment?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's something that I thought about so often. I knew in that moment it was where I was meant to be. Obviously, being a single mum at the time, I think a lot of people would have had thoughts about it and shared those with me, and I didn't want them to change the way I felt and how badly I wanted to be a mum. I had a really rough time in football for a couple of years. I then took an opportunity over in Norway, and I was loving football again, but there was just something missing. You know, I went to sleep thinking about kids, about the names that I wanted, what life would be like with a baby in it. I didn't really think about football too much at all. I had a meeting with a life coach, and he said, "What's missing in your life?" I said, "I want to be a mum," and he goes, "Well, go do it."
So when you spoke to that doctor and he said, "We can start today," how did you feel?
Emotional. Of course, I wanted to call my mum or my family, but I didn't want anyone to kind of talk me out of it, and knew that's exactly where I was meant to be. Everything happened really quickly, which I'm really grateful for. And when I touched down in quarantine in Brisbane, I had about a 5-day wait. Obviously, I took the pregnancy test too early. They came back negative, and then a couple of days later, I had a faint line there. Going through that first trimester, I guess hiding it from my teammates, hiding it from my club, hiding it from friends and family was definitely pretty tough. I guess a lot of times I was kind of questioning, have I not done the right thing in the way of, getting pregnant, but like signing for another club, I guess, with those unknowns. But, when I spoke to my coach there, he was so supportive.
And just tell us how much it has changed, because Harper is like a legend of women's football, especially in Australia.
It's crazy. I mean, I think for me, when I fell pregnant, I didn't really know if I wanted to get back to football. I knew football was always a big part of my life, but I didn't know how it would work. Obviously, being a single mum, my mum was really supportive from the minute I told her, pretty much. When I got back into the Brisbane team, she was on the first flight out with me. So I guess she made my comeback really, really easy, and I think having Harper there just you know, it made football more enjoyable. You know, you don't get stuck on a bad game or a bad training. You just get to go home and see a smiley little face, and football just became so much better for me, and getting to travel the world with her has just been the best thing in the world.
And I think you've said before that having a baby made you stronger as a footballer, and we definitely saw that at the World Cup, right, which you had an incredible tournament. How do you think it's affected your playing career?
It's been huge. I think, you know, obviously your body going through pregnancy, going through birth, for me it gave me so much more respect for my body, and as soon as I started to come back, I just felt like running was easier. You know, I felt like my body had eventually, you know, was stronger. I was able to push it further. Just everything felt a bit easier. And then obviously on the field, I feel like if you're happier off the field, you play better on the field. I think anyone who goes through birthing a child, you realise that you can kind of get through anything. I think, you know, for that makes you stronger. And mentally, I think juggling parenthood and also football, I think you can always draw on mental strength in those moments. And I think, yeah, football's no different.
Okay, you can say bye-bye.
Bye.
Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Come on. Bye, Hops. It's Lonnie's turn. Come on. Yeah, you can have it. Come on, let's go. Bye, Hop.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, it was the album that helped define a generation. The Who's Quadrophenia inspired one of the biggest films of the 70s. And now the iconic mod story is being told again, this time as a ballet. Our arts and entertainment reporter, Jason Mansoret, has been given an exclusive first look.
It's the seminal album by The Who set in the 1960s. Pete Townshend's Quadrophenia, a mod ballet, bringing the mod allegory to life via dance at Sadler's Wells East.
My wife Rachel did the orchestration for me, and as soon as I heard it, I said to her it would make a fabulous ballet. Heavy percussive sequences, there are explosive moments, there are also romantic moments. It's perfect for ballet.
For the mods, Quadrophenia was their soundtrack, a post-war movement characterized by fashion, music, and of course, scooters. The young rebels seen as a counterculture to the establishment. Townshend's album was an essay on the British adolescent struggle at the time, told via the fictional character Jimmy, a young mod struggling with his sanity, self-doubt, and alienation. And despite being recorded over this studio, its themes of identity, mental health, and modern masculinity are just as relevant today.
The phobias and the restrictions and the unwritten laws about how young men should behave, the ground that they broke, that we broke, because I was a part of it, men were letting go of wartime-related, uniform-related stances that if I wear this kind of outfit, it makes me look like a man.
As manosphere influencers like Andrew Tate and Netflix's Adolescents make headlines, for the lead dancer playing the album's protagonist, Quadrophenia's themes are contemporary, despite being written before he was born.
Well, I think there's a connection massively, and I think there may even be a little mod revival in some way. I love that myself. Like, I love non-conforming to, like, I guess, gender norms and typical, like, masculinity. I think it's great to challenge those things.
In 1979, the album was adapted into a film starring Ray Winston and Sting.
What it turned out to be in the movie was a story about culture, about social scenario, and less about really the specifics of mental illness and how that affects young people.
From an album to a film and now a ballet, the mods still cool, their issues still relatable. Jason Mansoret, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Eye columnist Yasmin Alabai-Brown and broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Observer, its headline, Starmer orders economic reset amid Trump tariff mayhem. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress. I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes. This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. First look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The Labour Party has suspended MP Dan Norris following his arrest on suspicion of rape, child sexual offences, child abduction and misconduct in a public office. The IDF has admitted it mistakenly targeted an aid convoy in Gaza last month that left 15 people dead. And Jaguar Land Rover says it won't be shipping any cars to the US for the rest of the month after Donald Trump imposed a 25% tariff on foreign cars imported into the US. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the Eye columnist Yasmin Alabai-Brown and broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. With the arrest and suspension of Labour MP Dan Norris in connection with allegations of rape and child sex offences is lead story in the Mail on Sunday. That story is also lead item in tomorrow's Sunday Telegraph. The Mirror too makes MP Dan Norris's arrest its main front page item. The Observer says Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has ordered a major rethink of government economic policy in case Donald Trump's trade tariffs do lasting damage to the UK. The Express has been speaking to experts and warns in an exclusive that a so-called Iron Dome defence system will not protect the UK from any Russian missile attack. While The Times reports that Russian sensors designed to gather information about British nuclear submarines have been found in UK territorial waters. The People goes with cannabis farms apparently being operated by British people on an island used for the filming of the TV series White Lotus. The Sun carries what it says is an attack by Strictly Come Dancing's Craig Revel Horwood on his fellow judges, insisting that he is the only one who matters. And finally, The Star has a poll which finds that a quarter of Brits have fallen out with their partner over their dress sense. The headline, "You're not going out like that." Interesting headline. We're joined tonight by Yasmin Alabai-Brown and Lucy Beresford, both superbly dressed, if I may say so. Let's start with, not with The Star, but with The Times front page and the story that Sir Keir Starmer is admitting that globalisation has failed. This as the tariff war rages imposed by Donald Trump. Yasmin.
Yeah, I mean, I just never get... I cannot get into Keir Starmer's head. Because when you say things like globalisation has failed, global trade has been going on since the first boats went out from this land in the 16th century, whenever it was. You can't say something has failed just because one man in America is doing some devastating stuff. So it's a weird thing to say. And then goes on to say, yeah, we are in a new era. It's a really difficult situation. I can't underestimate it. I'm not a prime minister. But it's the simplistic way in which he sometimes speaks that kind of bothers me a lot when it's a very complex world dilemma we're all in. What we need is more global cooperation, not less.
Lucy?
Yeah, I think it's a very disappointing statement from Keir Starmer. I think that Donald Trump... Well, if you were being charitable, you would say that he was trying to speak to a very particular part of his electorate. But if you were not being charitable, you would say that he didn't understand economics at all. Yeah. And my worry is that Keir Starmer is now colluding with him in this idea that globalisation has failed. What Keir Starmer should be doing is getting out there on the front foot and actually rebutting a lot of this, and actually pointing out that the American economy in particular has been outperforming the economies of the G7 countries for at least the last 20 years, if not 30 years. So the idea that people in America have not benefited from global trade is just a fallacy. And OK, so I'm not, you know, sitting by my swimming pool in my bikini, sipping a Negroni saying, you know, this doesn't matter. It does matter. It matters to people's livelihoods. The cost of living crisis was pretty horrendous before this all kicked off. But what we don't want is Keir Starmer saying, oh, yes, actually, I agree with you. I think actually that globalisation has failed and lots of people have been left behind. Now, the really interesting dimension to that is that actually a lot of people who voted for Brexit did feel that they had been left behind. But they hadn't necessarily been left behind by an economy which was actually so much better than it was in the 1970s and 1980s. And when Keir Starmer comes out and talks similar drivel like this, I really worry, because I want someone to be much more robust.
And Yasmin, also, I think this is addressing his permanent anxiety about reform voters. And he's using language which I think, appeals to them, you know. The migration comes into everything he now says, and also close the borders. You can't do that. And it's just so economically, as Lucy says, we need better better leadership than cowardice. And,
but is it that he's walking this tightrope where he doesn't want to be seen to disagree with President Trump, which thus far seems to have worked
but
to
not
his benefit
disagreeing.
with the lowest tariff
It's not
rates
quite the
for
same
the
as
UK.
colluding. And it is very interesting on the front page of The Observer, which I know we're also going to have a look at, which is that what clearly not just Keir Starmer, but leaders from countries around the world are frantically trying to work out what they should be doing. And there is this awful euphemism that's being used at the moment, reported in The Observer, which says that Keir Starmer, according to allies, feels that the old assumptions should be discarded, which basically means we might have to raise some taxes. Why are they not speaking plain English? Why can they not trust the electorate to actually see what's happening globally?
But when he
and
says the
respond
old
to that?
assumptions need to be disregarded, doesn't he mean that the world order has been changed by Donald Trump?
Not according to The Observer, it
We
doesn't.
can't see them as necessarily an ally anymore.
According to The Observer, it's basically suggesting that he and the Chancellor are trying to brace the nation for the idea that they may have to raise taxes again, despite having promised not to do so. So absolutely, that whole idea of walking that tightrope between definitely not wanting to annoy Donald Trump. Don't forget, we've got the Queen, the invite from the King. The rumours are that, in fact, that invite has been upgraded to a stay at Balmoral and things like that. We have got ways in which we can stroke that ego, but you don't have to go so far that you actually run the risk of making it difficult for your own people at home. And we need him to be much more robust.
And, this 10%, he's saying it today. He's so whimsical. He's so unreliable, Trump. OK? There's no way you can trust him. And to behave as if we're a colony of the United States is ironic, is it not? That's how we're behaving. We're the undeclared 51
the vassal state.
Yeah. Awful.
Interesting point of view on that. Let's move on from international politics. I'm going to have a look at the Telegraph now. And this story of the mother that was jailed for the Southport tweet or X post in which she basically incited the setting on fire of asylum hotels, and she spoke of mass deportations. Suella Braverman's come out saying that, it was really heavy-handed that she was jailed for this and it should be reviewed. Lucy?
Yeah, I'm very interested that Suella Braverman's done this, actually, because the topic of sentencing guidelines and whether there is a two-tier justice system has been very prominent in the last couple of weeks. We've had Robert Jenrick and Shabana Mahmood just really looking at the way in which judges were perhaps being encouraged to take certain circumstances into account as mitigating circumstances, which ended up making it look like that people from ethnic minorities, maybe women, different people would be judged differently depending on what those circumstances might be. And Suella Braverman is drawing attention to the fact that this particular lady in Southport sent her Suella Braverman calls it a crass tweet. It wasn't crass, it was actually dangerous. It was inciting people to potentially burn down the hostels where asylum seekers were staying. And I think we have to recognise that the context that summer last year, which was so febrile, it needed to be to be taken into account, not just the mitigating circumstances of the individual concerned. So what you've got here is a story about someone saying that actually you did this bad thing, you did this thing which was potentially very inflammatory and potentially very lethal, but somehow we ought to give you some mitigating circumstances as well. Whereas actually I think it's the context. We need to remember quite how volatile that situation was.
It's also
when so many people thought
there was a very interesting
had been a refugee
program on last week on women in prison. A fascinating program about how many women in this country, one for shoplifting, something very small. The prisons are full of women who shouldn't be in prison. And here is Suella defending one of them who actually incited such fear. I have spoken to migrant help groups in the area where all of this happened. And they said some of those asylum seekers really had a total mental collapse after that because they thought they were going to be burnt alive. And for Suella to step in this case, you know, it just makes you think, what is the motive here? If she said more women are in prison than should be and named her as one of them, I could go with it.
I'm afraid I feel that this is, I think the key word here is politicised.
Yeah.
And it
well, her quote,
actually...
Lucy Colney is a victim of a politicised two-tier
Suella
justice
Braverman
system.
is making the point that she thinks it's a politicised sentencing arrangement. I think this is Suella Braverman trying to make herself relevant again because she has seen how successful it has been for Robert Jenrick, who, of course, is also a member of the opposition. So you would argue that the opposition MPs haven't had as much oxygen as members of the cabinet. But suddenly, because of that debate about the sentencing guidelines and the way in which judges were perhaps being lent on to soften the sentences, I think she suddenly saw that and thought, oh, I need to get back in there because Robert Jenrick has actually had a lot of publicity around it.
This is politically relevant. We've just got a quick minute.
It's really a first draft of application to be the leaders. Both of them want that.
Quick minute on the Grand National, front page of the Sunday Mirror. Rockett nicks it. This lovely story, keeping it in the family. Willie Mullins trained Nick Rockett and his son Patrick rode the winning horse.
We are just so downbeat, aren't we? So neither of us really like horse racing. It's not that we don't like it, we actually actively disagree with it. And I think Britain has a very complicated relationship with animals. The donkey sanctuaries, there's a donkey sanctuary that receives more charitable donations than the top 4 domestic violence charities in the UK put together. 214 horses died in horse racing incidents in 2024. And a lot of changes were made for this particular race, the start time, the height of the fences. But unfortunately, I just think it's a really cruel sport.
I think it's a terrible sport. And actually, because the Royals love horse racing and so on, it's got this respectability. And it's absolute cruelty to animals, and it should stop.
OK, we both agree on that. We will leave it there. Yasmin and Lucy, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, allegations of spiritual abuse in the world's biggest youth Christian missionary group. More on that investigation from The Observer when we come back. Do stay with us.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom!
Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Premier League Run-In is live on NBC and Peacock as City Pride is on the line with a pair of iconic derbies.
It doesn't get any better.
Thursday, it's It's a London derby. Chelsea.
Beautiful goal from Chelsea.
Spurs.
What a game!
Then Sunday.
Brace yourself, Manchester, for the mother of all derbies.
United.
Here the place!
City. The Premier League run-in is live on NBC and streaming on Peacock.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press previews. Still with me, Yasmin Elabai-Brown and Lucy Beresford. Let's take a look first off in this section at the Observer front page. And this story about the world's biggest youth Christian missionary organisation. They're facing allegations of spiritual abuse and controlling behaviour from young people who say they were left traumatised, Lucy.
Yes, so it's the Observer that's actually been investigating this. Some of the claims go back over 20 years. And this Christian organisation, it's a missionary organisation. So they're hoping to train people who will go out and spread the word. But the word that they're spreading is that quite a lot of activity which most of us would consider to be fairly normal, they regard as utterly sinful. And therefore they've been trying to almost spiritualise that out of people, particularly homosexual thoughts and homosexual activity. So they're actually casting that at trying to promote the idea that that's something that could be cured, which is such an abhorrent idea. And to link it again as being somehow against God's will is really revolting. But if there are people listening who feel that way, I hope they would also argue that some of the other activity that this organisation thinks is abhorrent, such as sexual activity or pornography, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's just some of the porn that gets made, which is really atrocious. You know, some of these moral transgressions, I thought we'd consign that to the dustbin of history.
It's all going on. And, you know, in some communities, certainly in many Asian families, they use exorcism, terrible exorcisms if the young people say they're gay. And it's again, God is brought into all of this oppression, and it's a terrible thing. I've talked to victims. You know, they think that the devil's spirit is in them if they are gay, and they try and beat it out of them. So it's a horrible, horrible religious, kind of offence against people's sexuality.
And also it's targeting people at a very young age. You know, these people who are perhaps looking to do a gap year, for example. So we're talking late teens, very impressionable, brains are still developing, sexual orientation is perhaps also still under debate. And a lot of people, if they feel ashamed of where they're at, and if they're made to feel ashamed, which is specifically what this Youth Within a Mission, which is this organisation that seeks to train.
But just so their line, we get that out, they're saying that they're heartbroken by the claims and they're deeply committed to the safety and well-being of everyone in
Well, all I
their
would say
care.
is good for the Observer for investigating it.
Let's move to the Times, and this a story that we've covered before. This is the family of Agnes Wanjiru, a 21-year-old mother killed in Kenya. They're taking legal action in an attempt to end what they're describing as the cover-up over the name of the British soldier suspected of her murder.
Yeah, I've been following this for years, actually, and really congratulations to the Sunday Times, because it's not the kind of story our media tends to cover. You know, an African woman in Africa our soldiers, you know, all of this. And now they've taken the case to the Kenya High Court, and the army, according to this story, is still obfuscating, refusing to cooperate, refusing to recognise the validity of the court. And you know, I just find that extraordinary that if it was the other way, if a white English girl had this experience with black soldiers from some African countries, how would we behave? Just seems so wrong for the army to be behaving in this way, if this story is correct. But I totally trust the Sunday Times on it.
Okay.
I do.
We must leave it there only because of time. Thank you both for the moment. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, high pressure will ensure that the weather remains settled over the coming days. However, a subtle shift in position will bring cooler conditions and then greater amounts of cloud for eastern counties. It'll be a chilly start to the day with the risk of auroral frost from the Midlands northward. Low cloud from the North Sea will affect the northeast for a time, but this will burn back to coastal regions through the morning.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.